A new British medical journal editorial has major concerns about the COVID-19 vaccines. Find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It'll take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. You got to go follow me, though. I'm over on Instagram. I'm at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, so thank you so much for being here today. We also simulcast live over here on my Facebook page. What's up, guys? As well as on my YouTube channel. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay on IGTV. It goes right up onto IGTV just as soon as this is over. We also put it up on replay over on YouTube. If you type in a keyword Jimmy Rants, you will find the show. Over on YouTube today, I have a Jimmy Rants bonus episode. It is Thursday, so my Thursday podcast is called Real Talk. And so today's guest on Real Talk is Kara Collier. She's from the NutriSense company. So if you're interested in CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors you've heard me talk a lot about, go and watch that Jimmy Rants bonus episode over on YouTube, and you can see our interview, or if you'd prefer to listen to a podcast, it will air on the Real Talk podcast later today, llvlc.com. Kara, by the way, is a registered dietitian who understands the value of blood sugar testing, understands ketogenic diet, so it's kind of refreshing to hear from somebody like that, so go check that out. And then finally, listen to this show, watch this show at the official website, jimmyrants.com. And while you're there, you can see all the past episodes as well as support my work through the Patreon or PayPal link. And a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Okay, you guys, I wanted to bring to you a story today about something that could be entering all of our lives very soon. When COVID-19 hit America's shores in March of 2020, immediate plans were made to try to deal with it through a vaccine that would be rushed. Now, I'm not going to debate the merits for or against a vaccine today. That's not really the point of this Jimmy Rants. And you might even be thinking, well, I'm not going to be taking any such vaccine anyway, so why do I want to hear this? No, you want to hear this because this is about scientific method and the importance of testing data. Because if we're going to be compulsed in some ways, which the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo in New York, announced the other day that he's going to make it his goal to have everybody in his state get vaccinated. And he thinks that that's the way to immunity and da-da-da-da-da. And so if you're going to require and mandate everybody get the vaccine, don't you want to know if the trials that led up to it being approved for you to be taking it went through a methodical process of making sure it did a nice cross-section of everybody? You would hope so. You would also hope that it would make people less sick by taking the vaccine. You would expect that. And you would expect that it would not kill people, which unfortunately, we just got news yesterday that AstraZeneca is in phase 3 of their COVID-19 vaccine, and somebody died. We've already heard pretty much all of the major vaccine companies that are working on this vaccine. Every single one of them have had some kind of major negative effect. Pfizer, Moderna, all of them have had something happen in phase 3 trials. And of course, when something like that happens, you kind of have to go, okay, what happened? What do we need to tweak? What do we need to change? So I have an editorial today that I want to read to you because it's important that we get all the information about this. Because unfortunately, I don't think you're going to hear a lot other than the news stories about, like I said, the death of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Somebody died from taking it in the phase 3 trial. Very serious illness in the Pfizer trial and a couple of the other ones. So you need to know all the information about how these phase 3 trials are going and if there's any flaws in what they're doing. And there are, according to this editorial in the British Medical Journal. It was just published October 21st. So what was that, yesterday? And there are major issues with this vaccine and these trials. The title of the editorial, Will COVID-19 Vaccines Save Lives? All the current trials aren't designed to tell you that. Let that sink in. Will COVID-19 vaccines save lives? All the current trials aren't designed to tell you if they're going to save lives or not. And of course, you would think, isn't that why we're taking the vaccine? Trying to save lives because of this boogeyman virus that's out to kill us all. Wear a mask, socially distance, don't have Thanksgiving and Christmas together. That's all the little nonsensical stuff they're throwing at us right now because of this fear that we're going to have the big bad boogeyman COVID-19 virus hit us and thus overtake us. And so the vaccine is supposed to be the answer. We're going to read this editorial now to see that maybe it's not. The world has bet the farm on vaccines. I'm reading from Peter Doshi, the one writing this editorial in the British Medical Journal. The world has bet the farm on vaccines as the solution to this global pandemic. But the trials are not focusing on answering the questions that many might assume that they are. As all the phase 3 trials of COVID-19 vaccines are now reaching their target enrollments, officials have been trying to project calm. The U.S. coronavirus czar Anthony Fauci and the FDA leadership have offered public assurances that established procedures will be followed. Only a, quote, safe and effective vaccine will get approved. And 9 vaccine manufacturers issued a rare joint statement pledging not to prematurely seek any kind of regulatory review. But what will it mean exactly when a vaccine is declared effective? Listen to this, you guys. To the public, it seems obvious. The primary goal of a COVID-19 vaccine is to keep people from getting very sick and dying. Peter Hotez, the dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, said, ideally, you want an antiviral vaccine to do 2 specific things. First, you want to reduce the likelihood that you will get seriously ill and go to the hospital. And second, prevent infection and therefore interrupt disease transmission. Okay, I'm going to stop there. If the goal of a vaccine is twofold, and the first fold is reduce the likelihood you get severely ill and go to the hospital. Right now, if you are under the age of 70, do you realize your likelihood of getting severely ill and going to the hospital is less than 99, or it's 99%. That's it. We're already protected. If that's the goal of the vaccine, with a survival rate and recovery rate of 99%, that ain't good enough reason to have the vaccine, right? And that's one of the twofold reasons why you want an antiviral vaccine, they say. The second is to prevent infection and therefore interrupt disease transmission. No, we're all going to get infected. And they're not telling you this, but when you get the vaccine, they're infecting you with COVID-19. That's literally what they're doing. Now, it's a lower level, and so the viral load is low, and it's supposed to build up antibodies because of that low viral load, and it's controlled, blah, 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 blah. But these 2 reasons for having a vaccine are nonsensical. Reduce the likelihood you'll get severely ill and go to the hospital. There are treatment options when you get the first little sign of COVID-19. There are effective treatment options currently available that will deal with it before it gets too seriously ill, if it gets that far, and then prevent infection and therefore interrupt disease transmission. Our immune systems are meant to prevent infection from dramatically overtaking you. This is what has been lost in this whole discussion. Oh my God, we got 5,000 new cases of COVID-19. Yeah, and we're all going to get this thing sooner or later. We have to stop running away from it like it's the big bad wolf. It won't huff and puff and blow your house down, I promise you. One of these days, you're going to get it if you haven't already. And when you get it, your body is probably more than capable of fighting it off, unless you know you have all those comorbidities or compromised immune system and all the other kind of at-risk vulnerable people. Those people need to do all the precautions to protect themselves. But the vast majority of people, this is a whole lot of nothing. And so if the reason we're having a vaccine is to reduce the likelihood you get severely ill and go to the hospital and to prevent infection and therefore interrupt disease, that's a pretty stupid reason to develop a vaccine. If this thing was the bubonic plague and tens of millions of Americans had died, this would be probably appropriate action with all the things we're doing. But tens of millions have not died. Yes, it's sad that 220,000 people have died. But that's not a pandemic. Not in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And we could argue how many of those were actually from COVID-19 versus people that would have died anyway, versus people labeled as COVID-19 but dying in a car accident, these kinds of things. We could argue that. But let's just assume the 220 is valid. I don't think it is, but let's assume that it is for the sake of this argument. It's still multitudes less than what they said it was going to be. The current phase 3 trials are not actually set up to prove that it's actually going to do those two things. This is what the editorial is talking about. And if you just joined us, we're reading from a British medical journal editorial written by Peter Doshi. This was published just yesterday. Will COVID-19 vaccine save lives? Current trials aren't designed to tell us that. And that's the thing. The current trials that are in phase 3 are not trying to prove whether they will reduce the likelihood you get ill and have to go to the hospital, and they're not designed to prevent infection and therefore interrupt disease transmission. So if those are the stated purposes of vaccines, and yet the vaccines currently under development aren't using that as the litmus test for the efficacy of the vaccine, are you seeing why we're having trouble with this vaccine and why you should be highly, highly suspect? None of the trials currently underway are designed to detect any kind of reduction in serious outcome, such as hospital admissions, intensive care, or dying. Nor are the vaccines being studied to determine whether they can interrupt the transmission of the virus. So tell me this, if they're not looking at those things, what are they looking at? Like literally, isn't that the goal? To detect that there's going to be a reduction in hospital admissions and going to intensive care and dying, and to determine whether they can interrupt the transmission of the virus? If it's not those things, why are they doing the trials? And what are they looking at as primary outcomes besides, please, oh Lord, let's not kill somebody else like AstraZeneca did recently? This is frustrating because everybody's putting all their hope in a vaccine because that's what they're being told. But do they know that the primary outcomes of these trials are not set up to prove the very thing that we think it's supposed to prove? People are going to line up in droves to get this vaccine thinking that it's going to protect them from having to have any kind of serious outcome, such as going to the hospital, going in intensive care, or dying. There's a lot of people that will take it thinking they're not going to die. It's the same kind of people that take a statin medication because of their high cholesterol. And so therefore they think high cholesterol is a disease, and so they take this drug. And so they take this drug under the auspice of, well, if I take a statin medication, I definitely won't get a heart attack. Unfortunately, the statistics bear it out. About half the people who get a heart attack were on statin drugs at the time of their heart attack. So they don't prevent heart attacks. And neither will this vaccine prevent you from having complications from COVID-19 or possibly dying from it. But they're setting it up that way. Oh, we don't want to We don't want people to die, so everybody get the vaccine. And again, in New York State, the governor there, Governor Cuomo, just stated in a press conference a couple days ago, I'm going to force mandate every single New Yorker to take this vaccine when it becomes approved. So that's what's going on. And that's just New York State. It's going to be replicated in other states, and maybe, depending on who the leadership is in this country after the election, maybe forced nationally on everyone. Don't you want to know if it's going to be of efficacy of preventing you from going to the doctor or not with heavy complications, or whether it can interrupt the transmission of the virus? Because if we can't do those things, they're not going to let us out of our houses until we do. So if the vaccine's not the answer to that, because they're not actually looking at that as an outcome, isn't that an argument for let's get back out there and let our immune systems do what they were designed to do? Our immune system is the best vaccine on the market today. So make your vessel and your immune system as optimal as it could possibly be, and this crazy need for a vaccine will go away. And if enough people get back out there, get exposed, their immune system takes care of the virus, and enough people have this immunity either through T cells killing this or through their immune system taking care of it and having the antibodies present, then herd immunity can kick in. And a lot of people are even surmising now that America has had enough exposure. I know they're saying it's only been like 8 to 10% of the people exposed. I think it's far more than that. And enough Americans have been exposed that we're real close to herd immunity now. And then that doesn't even count where they're talking about the mutation of the virus is such that it's becoming less and less of a killer, and more, if you get infected, it could possibly make you a little bit sick, or most people no symptoms at all. Again, a 99% recovery rate for COVID-19. So let's take a look at evaluating mild, not severe disease. This is one of the problems that this editorial, again, Peter Doshi, an associate editor at the British Medical Journal, this is something he brought up in here, that in the studies, in the phase 3 trials of these COVID-19 studies, they're only evaluating mild, not severe COVID-19 disease. In a September interview, Medscape editor-in-chief Eric Topol pondered what counts as a recorded event in the vaccine trial. We're not talking about just a PCR positive mild infection. It has to be moderate to severe illness in order to qualify as an event. Is that right? He said, yes, that's right. According to Paul Offit, a vaccinologist who sits on the FDA advisory committee that may ultimately recommend the vaccine for license or emergency use. But that's not right. In all the ongoing phase 3 trials for which details have been released, laboratory confirmed infections, even with only mild symptoms, qualified as this primary endpoint. In other words, if they're trying to see, is the vaccine going to help those who have a more severe case of this, is it going to actually help? They're not testing those people. They're testing people with mild symptoms. In Pfizer and Moderna's trials, for example, people with only a cough and a positive test would bring those trials one event closer to the completion. So events. So in a phase 3 trial, they have to have enough events that show efficacy of the vaccine in order for it to get approved. And so you want it to show an event where somebody was very sick and got very well because they took this vaccine. So it kind of fudges the numbers a little bit. If AstraZeneca's ongoing UK trial is designed similarly to its paused US trial, for which the company has released details, a cough and fever with positive PCR test would suffice. Again, same kind of litmus test. And of course, AstraZeneca is the one that recently lost somebody in their phase 3 trial. Part of the reason may be numbers. Severe illness requiring hospital admission, which happens in only a very small fraction of symptomatic COVID-19 cases. This is key. They're making it seem like, with all the news coverage, that if you get COVID-19, you're going to be a very severely ill person. But what do you look at? Like, think of all the people, famous and otherwise, in the world of sports and politics and entertainment and across the gamut that have had COVID-19. You're not talking about people that got seriously ill and on their deathbed. No, most of them quarantined at home and they got over it and they recovered. That's how it is. So it's only a small fraction that actually get to that heavy symptomatic. Would be unlikely to occur in significant numbers in these trials, and that's the problem they're having. They're not having enough people get sick enough for them to be able to test those really sick people, because there's not a lot of really sick people. Data published by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in late April reported a symptomatic case hospitalization rate of 3.4% overall, and it varied from 1.7% in those up to 49 years, 4.5% in 50 to 64 years old, 7.4% in 65 and older. Because most people with symptomatic COVID-19 experience only mild symptoms, even the trials involving 30,000 or more patients would turn up very few cases of severe disease. And this is the problem. Do we really have a pandemic? Because I would think if you have a pandemic worthy of creating a vaccine that ostensibly they want everyone in the world to take, wouldn't you think that they would have a pretty easy time finding people that are heavily symptomatic enough to test whether this thing has efficacy or not? You would think. You would think. In the trials, final efficacy analyses are planned after just 150 to 160 events. Remember, these events, they're trying to accumulate enough events that it's proof of concept that the vaccine works, and thus they can approve it and thrust it on everybody. So that's what's going on. Most of these events are supposed to be of severely ill people who are hospitalized. And most of the events that are in these phase 3 trials currently, they had a little cough and a COVID-19 positive. They're an event that they gave them the vaccine for. A positive indication of symptomatic COVID-19 regardless of the severity of the illness. So that's what the events are. Yet until vaccine manufacturers begin to release their study protocols, trial registries and other publicly released information did little to dispel the notion that it was severe COVID-19 that the trials were assessing. Moderna, for example, called hospital admissions a key secondary endpoint in statements to the media. And a press release from the U.S. National Institutes of Health reinforced this impression, saying that Moderna's trial, quote, aims to study whether the vaccine can prevent severe COVID-19, end quote, and, quote, seeks to answer if the vaccine can prevent death caused by COVID-19, end quote. The chief medical officer at Moderna is this person named Tal Zaks. He told the British Medical Journal that the company's trial lacks adequate statistical power to assess those very outcomes. So their stated purpose in creating a vaccine, they're falling short. It's not happening. Does this concern anybody at all? That the very thing that is supposed to end this pandemic is not doing the statistical analysis that they need to do? Like, this is, I don't even know what it is. It's disgusting is what it is. That they have a stated purpose and most people are under this false illusion that this vaccine's going to come in and save the day. And they're not going through and having this be a primary outcome of the studies. They're in phase 3 of these trials, and almost every one of them are having adverse effects, including the AstraZeneca death the other day. But they're not seeing if it prevents the transmission of. They're not seeing if it slows down the rate of people going to the hospital, which isn't high already. And they're not seeing that it's going to prevent death. I would argue if you're injecting people with the very virus that they're currently running away from, there's a much higher chance they're going to die from that. Why aren't we talking about that? The trial is precluding from judging hospital admissions based on what is a reasonable size and duration to serve the public good here. So hospital admissions and deaths from COVID-19 are simply too uncommon in the population being studied for there to be an effective vaccine to demonstrate statistical significant differences in a trial of 30,000 people. In other words, they can't really do this because it's not really a pandemic. Sorry I'm yelling, but this pisses me off. We have been told all year, wait for the vaccine, wait for the vaccine, wait for the vaccine, wait for the vaccine. Now we're seeing they ain't got enough empirical data to do a valid study of a vaccine because there's not enough people sick to justify having a vaccine. Let the people get back out there. Let them be exposed to each other. 99.997% recovery rate for people under the age of 50. Like, this has been ludicrous from the start. And now even the trials of the great savior of everything that we've been waiting on is this great vaccine. And here we are, and they can't get enough data to prove its efficacy, which should give you great pause about wanting to take this thing. And I'll be damned if any government official tells me I must take this thing like Governor Cuomo did in New York. If you live in New York State, please tell me you're not okay with this. And we're not even getting into all the other things they're putting into the vaccine besides the vaccine. You can go all conspiracy theory on that one. But if we're just looking at the vaccine and the efficacy of the vaccine itself in the prevention of severe complications from COVID-19, they're not able to get enough people in order to test that. That should tell you guys something. The same is true of its ability to save lives or to prevent transmission. The trials just aren't designed to figure that out. I want to know then, if that's not what they're trying to figure out in these trials, what the hell are they doing in the phase 3 trials for these COVID-19 vaccines? If it's not to figure out if it's going to save people's lives and prevent them from going to the hospital and prevent the transmission, why the hell are we doing them? Guys, I'm fired up on this one. It is called Jimmy Rants for a reason, and I'm in full-on rant mode today because this should make everybody angry. Now, I know a lot of you guys, you're not interested in taking this vaccine. You trust your own immune system to take care of this thing, but I'm thinking about all of our family and friends that have bought into the fear. And if you buy into fear, you will do anything to rescue you from that fear and take that concern away. And so people will blindly have a needle shot into their arm under the guise of, oh, this is going to protect me, when it's not going to do anything of the sort, right? Would I like to know that this prevents mortality? Sure, because I believe it does. I just don't think it's feasible within the time frame of the trial. Too many would die waiting for the results before we even knew that. So that's the guy that's creating the Moderna vaccine. That's the what was his chief medical officer at Moderna. He thinks we can't wait to get this vaccine out to get enough people in the trial to prove its efficacy because, quote, too many would die waiting for the results. With all due respect, no, they would not. Most people are recovering like a champ. Again, if you're at the most vulnerable, you protect yourself, and you know those people in your family that are the highest risk for this. You do all the things for them. But the rest of us need to get back out there and create herd immunity so that this vaccine becomes a moot point. So what about the second criteria of interrupting the virus transmission, which some experts have argued should be the most important test in the phase 3 trials? You would think if you're trying to prevent transmission, they're talking about the asymptomatic transmitters of COVID-19. You don't know you have it, and so if you smell somebody or blow your nose on somebody, oh my God, they're going to get it and you're going to kill them. They're making it seem like now that, oh my God, we got to get rid of the asymptomatic people. And so don't you want to know if you can interrupt virus transmission of those asymptomatic? That's why they're like, everybody should take this because even the asymptomatic can spread this and da-da-da-da-da. If you're a believer in the vaccine, by the way, this just popped in my head. If you're a believer in the vaccine and you shame other people because you think they should be taking the vaccine, why are you worried? You took the vaccine. You're supposed to be immune now. Right? So those of us that choose not to take the vaccine, that's our choice. And we have that choice. We believe in our immune systems enough and we're not worried about this. So if someone takes the vaccine and they shame you for not taking it, hey, what are you worried about? You got the vaccine, you're protected now, right? So why would you need to mandate it on everyone? Just let those people that are scared out of their wits' end all line up to get this thing. The rest of us are going to go about living our lives. And next, like, who would argue with that? The Moderna chief medical officer went on to say, our trial will not demonstrate the prevention of transmission. They're not even looking at that. Because in order to do that, you have to swab people twice a week for very long periods, and that becomes operationally untenable. Operationally untenable or undesirable to the patient. Because last time I checked, when you're doing trials like this, the untenable position of having to swab them twice a week? Really? Aren't we trying to prevent tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans to make them safe? Wouldn't you want to do that kind of swabbing twice a week? Compensate them somehow if you have to. You're going to make a ton of money off this vaccine if you're the one approved and it gets out there and people take it. Compensate those people for having that thing rammed up their nose twice a week. Trust me, everybody has a price. Oh yeah, you want to ram that up my nose? Let's see. That'll cost you $1,000 every time you stick a swab up my nose. You can stay up there as long as you want, 10 minutes, whatever you're going to do, but stick it up my nose, but I need $1,000 cash. There would be people that would do that. Oh yeah, they would do it themselves just to get $1,000 and did that twice a week, $2,000, and then do that for like several months. Oh yeah, you would have people lined up. Compensate them enough. That's not a good enough. Operationally untenable because people won't do it. Yeah, they will. He repeatedly emphasized these operational realities of running a vaccine trial. Every trial design, especially phase 3, is always a balancing act between different needs. Listen to this, you guys. If you wanted to have an answer on an endpoint that happens at a frequency of 1/10 or 1/5 the frequency of the primary endpoint, you would need a trial that's either 5 to 10 times larger, or you'll need a trial that is 5 to 10 times longer in order to collect these events. Neither of these, I think, are acceptable in the current public need for knowing expeditiously that a vaccine works. So what they're saying there is, we have 30,000 people in their trial. And so if you need it because it's only 1/5 the frequency of the primary endpoint, you need 5 times that amount, meaning 5 times 30,000, which is 150,000. So they need 150,000 infected people to have a nice cross population of people that are asymptomatic, people with mild symptoms, and a few people that have enough people that have hospitalization type of symptoms. They don't have that capability of having that many people. That's problem one. Or a duration, 5 times the duration, which is why a lot of these vaccine trials go on for years. You need long enough time to prove the efficacy and to see if there's any side effects. But they don't have that time because they warn, oh, we don't have time because people will die in the meantime. He added a 30,000 participant trial is already a fairly large trial. If you're asking for a 300,000 trial, then you need to talk to the people paying for it. Now you're talking about not a $500 million to $1 billion trial. You're talking about $10 billion trial. And I think the public purse and operational capabilities and capacities we have are rightly spending, not betting the farm on just one vaccine, but as Operation Warp Speed, which is the U.S. government's COVID-19 vaccine plan, is trying to do, making sure that we're funding several vaccines in parallel, which is why Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca are the three leading candidates right now. There's lots of other ones out there, but those are the three main ones. Still, it's fair to say that most of the general public is assuming that the whole point of these trials, besides testing the safety, is to see whether it can prevent bad outcomes from happening. So, how do you reconcile that? That's what the British Medical Journal asked this guy from Moderna. History shows many examples of serious adverse events from vaccines brought to market in periods of enormous pressure and expectation. There were contaminated polio vaccines in 1955, which was the cause of Guillain-Barré syndrome in recipients of flu vaccines in 1976. And then narcolepsy was linked to one brand of influenza vaccine back in 2009. Finding severe rare adverse events will require the study of tens of thousands of patients, but this requirement will not be met by early adoption of a product that has not gone through the full evaluation. And that's the problem. If we don't give this the time it's supposed to have in order for it to be proven safe and effective and all the things, and then you introduce it to the market and you make it approved, and then people start getting sick. And here's the bad part, guys. All of these vaccine manufacturers have full immunity from you suing them. So let's say they approve the vaccine, it comes on the market, you get shot in your arm, bada bing, bada boom, you think you're safe and healthy because you took this vaccine, and then suddenly you get an adverse effect. You can't sue. It'll be your responsibility to pay for your medical bills, your loss of income from not working. If they're that confident in the vaccine, I think they need to remove that. That was put into place, by the way, in the 1980s, where they gave these pharmaceutical companies full immunity from vaccine adverse effects being suable. I think that needs to be yanked. If you believe in your vaccine that much, put your money where your mouth is. I guarantee you, if they did that, they would turn every rock over to make sure this thing is safe. But right now, they don't care. Right now, they don't have any reason to care other than they're trying to get it out as soon as possible because of political pressure. They're trying to get it out as soon as possible because of, so many people are dying. They're making it seem like tens of millions of people are dying, and they got lots of pressures on them. And plus, of course, the economic pressure, because all this money has been poured into making the vaccine. If you don't have an end product that you can sell, you're not going to make money. And so that's also a factor in this as well. Harvard drug policy researchers Derry Avorn and Aaron Kesselheim recently wrote in JAMA, COVID-19 vaccine trials are currently designed to tabulate final efficacy results once 150 to 160 trial participants develop symptomatic COVID-19, and most trials have specified at least one interim analysis, allowing the trials to end with even fewer data. That's not a lot of data. If you're talking 30,000 total people in a trial, and you only need 150 to 160 of those 30,000 people to develop symptomatic COVID-19, they're trying to see, did the vaccine work? Medscape's Eric Topol has been a vocal critic of the trial's many interim analyses. These numbers seem totally out of line with what would be considered stopping rules. I mean, you're talking about giving a vaccine with any of these programs to tens of millions of people, and you're going to base that on just 100 people getting COVID-19 symptoms? Great uncertainty remains over how long a randomized trial of a vaccine will be allowed to proceed. If efficacy is declared, listen to this, you guys. One possibility is that the thousands of volunteers who received a saline placebo, the control group, would be offered the active vaccine, in effect ending the period of randomized follow-up. Such a move would have far-reaching implications for our understanding of vaccines' benefits and harms, rendering uncertain our knowledge of whether the vaccines can reduce the risk of serious COVID-19 disease and precluding any further ability to compare adverse events in the experimental arm versus the placebo arm. So, did you catch that? If at some point they get enough of those events that they say, you know what, we're ready, efficacy is declared, and the control group is suddenly given that vaccine, you take away any ability to compare and contrast what would happen to the control group compared with what would happen to the people given the vaccine. Do you see the problem in this? You need to have that contrast. And this is a reason most vaccines take years to develop. Because yes, you give them the vaccine now, but the adverse effect might happen down the road, 3, 4, 5 years. Don't you want to see that? And don't you want to have, with the person that just got the saline solution, see what happened to them? I would think so. It'll be a decision we'll have to take at that time. We have not committed one way or the other, says Moderna's chief medical officer. It will be a decision where the FDA and the NIH will also weigh in, and it will probably be a very difficult decision because you will be weighing the benefit to the public in continuing to understand the long-term safety by keeping people on a placebo and the expectation of the people who have gotten the placebo to be crossed over now that has been proven effective. This should be very concerning. This goes off the script of what real science when it comes to vaccinations is about. And again, if we're only talking about the vaccine, this is serious, serious business. Not even bringing into what else are they putting in there besides the vaccine. If you just focus just on the vaccine, they're doing this highly sloppily. Number one, we have a bad outcome as our endpoint. It's COVID-19. Moderna, like Pfizer and Janssen, has designed its study to detect a relative risk reduction of at least 30% in participants developing lab-confirmed COVID-19, consistent with the FDA and international guidance. Number two, he pointed to influenza vaccines, saying that they protect against severe disease better than mild disease. To Moderna, it's the same for COVID-19. If its vaccine is shown to reduce symptomatic COVID-19, it will be confident it also prevents and protects against serious outcomes. They don't know that, though, unless they have those patients that have the serious complications. They're going to extrapolate that because it helped with the milder symptoms, obviously it would help with the more severe, but they don't know that unless they have those patients in the population of the 30,000 people in the trial. The truth is that the science remains far from clear-cut, even for influenza vaccines that have been used for decades. Although randomized trials have shown an effect in reducing the risk of symptomatic influenza, such trials have never been conducted in elderly people living in the community to see whether they save lives. And this is another concern. Are they doing a nice cross-section of all the people? We're going to get to that here in a second. All the people across the population, all races, all sex, all ages, all everything. Are they really looking at this closely enough? Or are they targeting a specific segment of the population, declaring, oh, they're fine, they got better, they took our vaccine, they got better, therefore everybody should be taking it? And again, I'll go back to statin drugs. Do you know there's not been one single study that's ever been conducted on cholesterol-lowering medication, statin medications, on women? They've not been tested on women. And yet, how many women take a statin medication today? A bunch. And they do that because they've been told, oh, it helps to lower cholesterol and improve heart disease. Did you know if you're a woman and you're taking a statin medication, that's never been tested on a woman in a trial? Nope, sure hasn't. And so if you don't test a wide cross-section of the population, from young people to old people, from black to brown to white, from all demographics, how do you know it's going to be effective for all demographics? We're going to get in that in just a second. Only 2 placebo-controlled trials in the population have ever been conducted, and neither was designed to detect any difference in hospital admissions or deaths. Moreover, dramatic increases in the use of influenza vaccines has not been associated with a decline in the mortality. So, more influenza vaccines has not been associated with the death rate going down. Isn't that what they're telling us now? Oh, if we don't wait for the vaccine, more people are going to die. Well, according to the previous influenza vaccines, more people didn't die. I mean, just as many people died with the vaccine as happened before the vaccine. So did the vaccine really do anything other than maybe prevent a few symptoms in people? But again, I'm going to remind you, 99% of people have full recovery from COVID-19. And yet they want us to wait on this mysterious vaccine. Okay, let's get that not enrolling enough elderly people and minorities. A vaccine that has been proved to reduce the risk of symptomatic disease by a certain proportion should, you might think, reduce serious outcomes such as hospital admissions and deaths in equal proportion. But Peter Marks, an FDA official with responsibility over vaccine approvals, recently said as much about influenza vaccinations, which only prevent flu in about half the people who get it. And yet that's very important because that means that it leads to half as many deaths related to influenza each year. So he's saying, we have this influenza vaccine, but only half the people get benefit from it. But that means that half of the deaths are going to happen. He's fudging with math there. That's not how it works. Listen to this part. But when vaccines are not equally effective in all populations, this theory is completely untrue and breaks down. In frail elderly people who are understood to die in disproportionate numbers from both influenza and COVID-19, if they're not enrolled into vaccine trials in sufficient numbers to determine whether case numbers are reduced in this group, there can be little basis for assuming any benefit in terms of hospital admissions or mortality rates. Whatever reduction in cases is seen in the overall study population, most of which may be among healthy adults, this benefit may not apply to the frail elderly subpopulation, and few lives may be saved. This is such a key point here. The vast majority of the people who have died of COVID-19 have been 70 and older. Vast majority. And yet in these trials, in these phase 3 trials of all these companies working on a vaccine for COVID-19, very, very few are in that age group. It's in the healthy population. Isn't that concerning if we're trying to make sure grandma and grandpa get protected from this because they're in the vulnerable group? You know, they're saying, well, we need to protect them. They're in the vulnerable group and they need to be the first ones to get this vaccination when it comes out and it's approved. But what if they didn't test it on people in that population? Don't you want 70, 75, 85, 90-year-olds who have symptoms of COVID-19 taking this vaccine? Don't you want to see if it works on them? I would think so. But if they exclude that population and then they release it to the world and that population at very high numbers starts getting it, what happens if a certain percentage, I don't know, 15% of those people die, get seriously ill and die from COVID-19 after having this vaccination because they didn't test whether it was going to work on that population or not? Do you see where there could be problems? And, oh yeah, by the way, the families can't sue these pharmaceutical companies because their family member died of this vaccine that they were told was going to save them. Are you seeing the intricacies here? Somebody's horn is going off outdoors, so if you hear turn off your car alarm. Maybe that's their warning sign to not bring the vaccine to their house. That would be wonderful. This is hard to evaluate in all the current trials because there are large gaps in the types of people being enrolled in phase 3 trials. Despite recruiting tens of thousands of people, only 2 trials are enrolling children that are less than the age of 18. Again, they're talking about the kids. And of course, kids, this thing is negligible in kids. We've had so few kids get COVID-19 and die from COVID-19, and yet they're making all the kids stay home from school and all the draconian measures they're doing there. But only 2 of these trials looking at a COVID-19 vaccine, 2 of them are enrolling children under the age of 18. All exclude immunocompromised people and pregnant and breastfeeding women for the obvious reasons. That's ethical. And though the trials are enrolling elderly people, few or perhaps none of the studies seem to be designed to conclusively answer whether there is a benefit in that population or not. In other words, they have to have enough people in that population to prove that benefit, despite the fact that they have obvious vulnerability to COVID-19. So adults over 65 will be an important subgroup that we will be looking at according to Moderna. That said, any given study is powered for its primary endpoint, in our case, COVID-19 disease, irrespective of age. So Al Summer is the Dean Emeritus of Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. He told the BMJ that if they have not powered for evidence of benefit in the elderly, I would find that a significant, unfortunate shortcoming. He emphasized the need for innovative follow-up studies that will enable us to better determine the direct level of protection immunization has on the young and separately on the elderly, in addition to those at the highest risk of severe disease and hospitalization. I mean, if they're not going to get enough people in their trials to see if there's efficacy, and they finally turned off that stupid horn. It was throwing me off my game. I was stumbling a little bit because if they're not going to get enough people that are going to show how this thing works in different ages and different races and all of that, if they're not going to do that, I think they need to show that. And if you don't have that data because those patients aren't in the trial, you need to be getting those kinds of patients in the trial. One view is that trial data should be there for all target populations. If we don't have adequate data in the greater than 65-year-old group, then the greater than 65-year-old person should not get this vaccine. Listen to this, guys. Which would be a shame, because they're the ones who would probably most likely die from the infection if they got it. We have to generate the data. So in order to get the data, you got to test that population. I can't see how anybody, the Data and Safety Monitoring Board or the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee or the FDA decision makers would ever allow a vaccine to be recommended for that group without having adequate data. I feel the same way about minorities. You can't convince minority populations to get this vaccine unless they are represented in the trials. Otherwise, they're going to feel like they're guinea pigs, and understandably so. Yeah, don't talk to the black community about having vaccines tested on them. There's a great history there that you can look up on your own. Look up the Tuskegee experiment and other things. I talked to a guy next week on my Real Talk podcast named Dave Martin, a black gentleman, and he and I got into that towards the end of my interview with him on Real Talk. So stay tuned to that next Thursday. But man, if they're not going to test enough of the population, variety of the population who could potentially be harmed by this, if they're not testing that in their trials, and then they come out with this vaccine and then it suddenly goes in that population, what happens if a huge percentage of those people get some kind of an adverse effect, have some kind of an illness, get super sick to be hospitalized, and God forbid, die? It's bad, guys. And I hope this BMJ editorial is illustrating to you why you need to be highly concerned and suspect about this vaccine. And it's a series of them that are being created. All of them have their own formulation about how they created their vaccine. I don't know. Regardless of where you stand on vaccines in general, this editorial explains some of the major concerns that you should have before you ever get a needle put in your arm to pump this vaccine into your body. All right, guys, let's see what you guys have to say. I'm going to come here first to Instagram, then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is a website. Go there and support my work. I have a PayPal link as well as a Patreon link, and a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Cecilia says that's the number one thing now, to take away our freedom to choose. because the big industries would lose billions. It's never been about our health. Well, and that's a major concern that a lot of people have, is they're pushing for mandatory vaccines because there's a lot of special interests at work. Pay attention to who's pushing for mandatory vaccinations. Pay attention to who's saying, oh my gosh, for the greater good, we all need to be taking this vaccine. Pay attention to those people, because they are the ones that probably are standing to benefit the most. Okay? That's your litmus test. Keep your eyes wide open, you guys. Cecilia said about the test going up the nose, sure, rupture my blood-brain barrier. Yeah, it does do that. Rachel says a vaccine only makes sense if getting infected equals a death sentence, not this. That's right. That's right. And it's, again, they make it seem like that this is this great pandemic, that we need this emergency vaccine and as if millions of people are dying. Tens of millions of people are dying. No. Again, I'm not discounting 220,000 people. Please don't mishear me. But 220,000 people is not 22 million people. And they were calling for it was going to be millions at the beginning of all this. Halmoni says, yes, I'm concerned. I'm 73. Yeah, you should be very concerned if they're not going to be testing your population, your age group. You should be very concerned, because you don't know how it's going to react in you. You will end up being the guinea pig. You'll be the outside the parameters of the trial guinea pig. You'll be the study participant at that point. And I don't think anybody wants to do that. Marnie says, I bet we can't get on a plane without a vaccine. Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion for another day. I know Australia is talking about that in Victoria, where that, I'm trying to be nice, but Dan Andrews is the premier there in that state, in Victoria, where Melbourne, Australia is. And he has just pretty much said that, oh yeah, we're going to have little ways that we'll track to see if you've had the vaccine. And if you haven't had the vaccine, you won't be allowed in our country. I know Ireland's talking about a vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine passport, that it will be attached to your passport and all this stuff. So yeah, the world is about to change. No matter what happens, the world is about to change pretty radically because of this. And again, to what end? Why is COVID-19 so special? We didn't see this with the swine flu, H1N1. We didn't see this with anything before. Why all of a sudden has COVID-19 become this rallying cry for taking away a lot of things that we've always had? We lived through things that were much worse than COVID-19, and yet now this is being viewed as if tens of millions of Americans have died, and they simply haven't. Thank you, Instagram. Let me pop over here now to my Facebook page. What's up, Facebook? See what you have to say. Judy says my niece is a nurse, and she's had COVID. She's tested twice a week through her job. She shows she has antibodies, but she is still required to wear a mask, goggles, a shield over that. She goes home each night wearing those protection devices, having headaches. Yeah. And I'm sorry that she got that, but it does sound like she's doing okay, other than all the things they're making her do. Oh, you had more to say. She's been informed she will be required to get the vaccine when it comes out. Oh, so she's already had COVID. She's built up antibodies in her system, IgG and IgM, and yet they're still going to make her take the vaccine. What is the vaccine supposed to do for somebody that's already been exposed to COVID-19? Isn't the point of a vaccine, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the point to infect you enough to create antibodies? She already has antibodies. What is the vaccine going to do that she hasn't already done with her own immune system? If she's already had the virus and is testing negative twice a week and shows antibodies, why get a vaccine? Exactly. That makes no sense, Judy. I hope she pushes back on that. I know she's risking her job by doing that, but if she has antibodies. The point of the vaccine is to create antibodies so that you fight off COVID-19 before it enters your body. That doesn't make any sense at all. Kimberly says, preach it. I preach, girl. Today I got off on a bit of a rant. I haven't ranted like this in a little while, so it kind of felt good to let her loose. Hello, Stephanie Lincoln. She says, big hugs. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you, Facebook. Now let me go over here now to my YouTube channel, see what you guys have to say. Craig says, could companies force proof of vaccination before entry like we see now with masks, or am I being too worrisome? Oh, no. No, you're expressing a concern that a lot of people have, that they were able to force us to wear a mask, mandate masks. What would stop them from doing a lateral move from mandating masks to mandating vaccines? And I guess that's going to be a company by company decision. If that doesn't motivate you to try to go to work for yourself, I don't know what does. And what about these businesses that require you to wear a mask now, but maybe these businesses will require you to have a vaccine? Will enough people not take the vaccine that would make them take a major hit to their economy? I think it would. So they need to be very mindful that their choices will come with consequences. If they're going to require people to have a vaccine before they enter the store, or if you're going to work at a place, require you, I mean, they've just got to know, okay, not everybody's going to play the game. And again, I can't get over that, Judy. Your niece is an RN, has had COVID-19, has recovered, shows presence of IgG, and still needs to take the vaccine. What's the vaccine supposed to do? That's so crazy. Well, guys, I hope this BMJ editorial on COVID-19 vaccine trials, sharing major concerns, I hope this got your attention today. That, yes, we're all waiting for a vaccine, but do most people realize the vaccine's not being fully vetted, having all the populations, looking at endpoints of prevention of deaths, prevention of hospitalizations, prevention of the transmission? I think most people just assume all of those things are going to be looked at in phase 3 of these trials. And not one single one of these trials is looking at those as primary outcomes. That should be highly concerning to everybody watching this today. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. Go follow me right here. I'm on Instagram at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thank you so much for being here today. We also simulcast on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay on IGTV. It will go up just as soon as this is over. It goes right up on IGTV. We also put it up over on YouTube. Just type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants. You should be able to find the show over on YouTube. We do have a special Jimmy Rants bonus episode over there for you today. Kara Collier is my guest today. She's a registered dietitian from the company NutriSense. In fact, this company right here, NutriSense, that has the CGM technology. We talk all about continuous glucose monitors and why pretty much everybody should consider having a continuous glucose monitor put in so you know how you're doing in your health. So go listen to that or watch that on the Jimmy Rants bonus episode at YouTube, or it will be on the Real Talk podcast at llvlc.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. So go check that out, you guys. And then finally, we have an official website for this show. It is jimmyrants.com. While you're there, you can see all the past episodes, and you can also show your support. If you like what I do here, you like this kind of cutting edge. This literally hit yesterday afternoon, and I'm doing it live for you guys here today. So always love to keep you on the cutting edge. And if you like that and appreciate that, go support my Patreon or my PayPal link at jimmyrants.com. Anna says, thankfully, I'm accepted. The ketamine 4 infusions won't allow for any vaccine. Oh, you're exempted. Please keep me in prayers. I'm on my way for grueling 4 hours, and I've already had COVID. Oh, wow. God bless you. Yes, I got the gist of what you meant, Anna. Thank you for that, and I do wish you well today, so thank you for that. All right, guys, that's it for now. We will be back again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Ask Me Anything is tomorrow, and I got a very special announcement I'm going to make on tomorrow's episode of Ask Me Anything, and it involves next week. Next week is my last week of 2020. I'm going away in the months of November and December, so next week I've got some special things planned. We'll tell you about those things tomorrow. So until tomorrow at 11 a.m., we'll see you then.